The storm raged across Titan's methane seas, but inside the research vessel Hawking, Dr. Elena Reyes barely noticed the howling winds. Her attention was fixed on the readings from the deep scanning array, which showed something that shouldn't exist. A perfectly geometric structure buried 3 kilometers beneath the moon's surface. "Control, are you seeing this?" she asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. 20 years of synorchaeological research had taught her to contain her excitement. But this was different. This was what she'd spent her career searching for. "Confirmed, Doctor," came the response from the orbital station. "Structure appears artificial, approximately 200 meters in diameter. Material composition, unknown." Elena studied the holographic display floating above her console. The structure was a dodecahedron, its 12 faces covered in patterns too regular to be natural. But it was the energy signature that made her breath catch, a faint but steady pulse, like a heartbeat that had continued for untold millennia. The discovery team assembled within hours. As Elena watched the drilling operation from the Hawkins Bridge, she couldn't help but reflect on humanity's journey to this moment. 3 decades of expansion across the solar system, establishing colonies on Mars and mining operations throughout the asteroid belt, had given them the experience needed for deep space operations. But nothing had prepared them for this. The drill broke through after 18 hours of careful operation. Elena led the first team into the shaft, their environmental suits protecting them from Titan's hostile atmosphere. As they descended, the structure's energy signature grew stronger, creating interference that made their instruments flutter. "Team, hold position," Elena ordered as they reached the final approach. The chamber ahead was perfectly preserved, its walls gleaming as if they'd been polished yesterday, not buried for what must have been millions of years. "Dr. Chen, run a full spectral analysis. Dr. Patel, set up the quantum field sensors. Nobody touches anything until we know what we're dealing with." The analysis took hours, but what they found defied explanation. The structure wasn't just a building. It was a machine, a single integrated system that somehow maintained its integrity despite its age. The patterns on its walls weren't decorative. They were functional, a language of mathematics and physics written in a form they were only beginning to understand. "It's some kind of defensive system," Dr. Chen announced, his voice filled with awe as he studied the readings. "These energy patterns, they're designed to manipulate space-time itself. Whoever built this, they weren't just advanced. They were operating on principles we've barely theorized." Elena approached one of the walls, her hand hovering just above its surface. The material seemed to shimmer, responding to her presence. "Not just defensive," she corrected. "Look at these configurations. It's adaptable, designed to learn and evolve. But something's different about the core programming. It's like it was abandoned before it was finished." Before anyone could respond, their comms crackled with an urgent message from orbital control. "Dr. Reyes, we're detecting multiple objects entering the solar system at relativistic speeds. They've already passed Neptune's orbit." Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with Titan's frigid environment. "Configuration. Artificial, Doctor. Definitely ships. Large ones. And they're decelerating directly toward Saturn." As if responding to the news, the ancient structure's pulse quickened, its patterns shifting faster. Elena realized with sudden clarity that they hadn't found this artifact by accident. They'd been allowed to find it, at this specific moment, for a reason. "Upload all our data to the quantum network," she ordered. "Every scan, every reading. And get me a direct link to the Solar Defense Council. I have a feeling we're about to meet someone who knows exactly what this machine was built for." The approaching ships continued their deceleration burn, their trajectory precise and unwavering. Humanity had just made its first contact with an advanced alien civilization, but Elena suspected it wouldn't be the peaceful exchange they'd hoped for. The real question was, had they found this ancient defensive system in time to understand it, or had they simply drawn attention to themselves before they were ready? As she watched the patterns shift and flow across the structure's surface, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that humanity's greatest test was about to begin, and their survival would depend on understanding not just how this technology worked, but why its creators had abandoned it unfinished. The Nexari ships emerged from their deceleration burn like black diamonds against Saturn's rings, their surfaces absorbing light in ways that defied physics. Elena watched from the observation deck of Titan Station as the alien vessels took up position around Saturn's largest moon, their presence both beautiful and terrifying. 7 vessels, each approximately 3 kilometers in length, Admiral Santos reported, his hologram flickering beside Elena. Their energy signatures are unlike anything we've ever recorded. The amount of power they're casually radiating would run Earth's grid for a century. Elena nodded, her attention fixed on the largest ship, its hull marked with patterns eerily similar to those found in the underground structure. They're not here to talk, are they? As if in answer, every communication device in the solar system activated simultaneously. The message came in perfect English, but carried harmonics that made human teeth ache and computers glitch. We are the Nexari, inheritors of the precursor legacy. You have accessed knowledge forbidden to lesser species. Surrender the artifact and all associated data within 10 Earth days, or face the consequences of your transgression. The message repeated once, then silence fell. Elena exchanged glances with Admiral Santos, whose hologram had stabilized. 10 days, she said quietly. That's all they're giving us. 9 days and 18 hours now, Santos corrected grimly. The Defense Council is convening in 30 minutes. They'll want your analysis. The council chamber in Geneva was packed when Elena presented her findings. Representatives from every spacefaring nation watched as she brought up holographic displays of both the artifact and the Nexari ships. The similarities are undeniable, she explained, highlighting matching patterns. The Nexari are using technology derived from the same civilization that built our artifact. But there's something odd about their implementation. She zoomed in on detailed scans. Their ships are perfect, and I mean that literally. Every pattern, every energy signature is mathematically precise, without a single deviation. Isn't that good engineering? Someone asked. Not necessarily, Elena countered. In the artifact we found, there are subtle variations, like the technology was designed to adapt and evolve. The Nexari versions are static, unchanging. They've achieved a kind of technical perfection, but at what cost? Before she could continue, alarms blared throughout the chamber. On the main display, one of the Nexari ships had moved, positioning itself above Europa, Jupiter's ice-covered moon and location of humanity's largest off-Earth research facility. They watched in horror as an invisible force gripped the moon. Fissures appeared across its surface, spreading in mathematically perfect patterns. Within minutes, Europa shattered, its pieces arranged in a precise spiral pattern that stretched across thousands of kilometers. A demonstration, Admiral Santos said quietly, to show us what happens if we refuse. Elena stared at the destruction, her mind racing. No, it's more than that. Look at the precision, the perfect mathematical patterns. They're showing us their mastery of the precursor technology. They want us to understand how far beyond us they are. The council erupted in panicked discussion. Some advocated immediate surrender, others called for military action, despite the obvious technological gap. Elena tuned them out, her attention fixed on new data streaming in from their sensors. Admiral, she interrupted the chaos. During the Europa demonstration, our quantum sensors detected something interesting. The Nexari ship's energy pattern never varied, not even slightly. It maintained perfect, absolute consistency throughout the entire operation. Santos frowned. Meaning? Meaning they're using the technology exactly as it was designed, without any modification or adaptation. They've achieved perfect implementation, but they're bound by that same perfection. They can't, or won't, deviate from its original parameters. She brought up new displays, showing the artifact's core systems. But look at what we found on Titan. The variation patterns, the adaptive algorithms, the original builders were working on something new, something that went beyond perfect implementation. They abandoned it unfinished, but maybe, she paused, an idea forming. Maybe they abandoned it because perfection wasn't the answer they were looking for. The Admiral's eyes narrowed as he followed her logic. Are you suggesting we could modify this technology? Take something they consider perfect and sacred, and change it. The Nexari have mastered this technology, but they're using it exactly as it was designed. They see any deviation as blasphemy. Alina's fingers danced across the controls, bringing up theoretical models. But humans, we've never achieved perfection in anything we've built. Instead, we adapt, we modify, we find ways to make things work better by making them work differently. And we have 9 days to do it, Santos added grimly. Elena looked up at the display showing the Nexari ships, their perfect forms hanging like judgment in the sky. Then we better get started, because I have a feeling that when they say surrender or face the consequences, they're not talking about just destroying another moon. The Council quickly authorized emergency measures, mobilizing every scientific resource Earth possessed. As Elena headed back to Titan to begin work on the artifact, she couldn't help but wonder if the original builders had foreseen this moment. Had they left their work unfinished not because they failed, but because they were waiting for someone who could think beyond perfection? The Titan facility had transformed into humanity's last hope. Scientists from every nation worked in continuous shifts, their former rivalries forgotten in the face of extinction. Elena hadn't slept in 36 hours, but her hands remained steady as she manipulated the quantum interface probing the artifact's core systems. Look at this, she called to Dr. Patel, who was running simulations nearby. The holographic display showed energy patterns flowing through the artifact's structure. The Nexari think this technology is perfect, but they're missing something fundamental about its design. Patil moved closer, her dark eyes tracking the energy flows. These patterns, they're not uniform. There are micro-variations, almost like it was designed to evolve. Elena finished. The original builders weren't trying to achieve perfection. They were trying to transcend it. Their breakthrough came during hour 42 of continuous research. Dr. Chen, monitoring the artifact's quantum state, noticed something unusual. The pattern variations, he announced, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. They're not random. They follow a fractal progression, but with deliberate imperfections built into the sequence. Elena rushed to his station, ignoring her body's protests at the sudden movement. The data scrolling across his screen confirmed his observation. They weren't mistakes, she whispered. The imperfections are the key. The technology isn't just supposed to be perfect. It's supposed to learn, to adapt, to become something new. Admiral Santos' hologram appeared in the lab. Dr. Rice, we're down to 6 days. Please tell me you have something. Elena straightened, her fatigue forgotten in the excitement of discovery. Better than something. We understand why the original builders abandoned this technology unfinished. They weren't failing. They were leaving room for improvement. She brought up new displays, showing the modified energy patterns they'd discovered. The Nexari worship perfection. They've mastered this technology by implementing it exactly as designed. But look what happens when we introduce controlled imperfections into the system. The simulation showed energy patterns shifting, changing, evolving in ways that would have horrified the Nexari. Where their systems maintained perfect, unchanging symmetry, these patterns flowed and adapted, creating new configurations that the original builders had only theorized. Instead of trying to achieve perfect stability, Elena explained, we're teaching it to be deliberately unstable. The original system creates impenetrable barriers. Our version creates dynamic fields that can change and respond to threats. Santos studied the displays intently. Can it match their power output? No, Elena admitted. We'll never match their perfect implementation. But we don't need to. Think about martial arts. Sometimes the strongest stance is the one that can bend without breaking. The next 4 days passed in a blur of activity. Teams worked around the clock, modifying the artifact systems in ways its original builders had never imagined. They weren't trying to perfect the technology. They were deliberately introducing controlled chaos into its operations. Energy consumption is off the charts, Paddle reported during one test. We're drawing more power than Earth's entire grid generates in a year. That's because we're thinking too conventionally, Elena replied. She brought up a new set of plans. The Nexari power their ships with perfect antimatter reactions. We're going to do something much messier. We're going to use solar flares. The idea was audacious. Instead of trying to generate perfect, controlled energy like the Nexari, they would tap into the sun's natural chaos. Solar collectors would capture the violent, unpredictable energy of stellar flares, feeding that raw power into their modified systems. It's insane, Chen said, reviewing the calculations. The energy fluctuations alone should tear the system apart. In a perfect system, yes, Elena agreed. But we're building something that thrives on imperfection. The fluctuations won't destabilize it. They'll make it stronger. With less than 2 days remaining, they began final modifications to the artifact. The once perfect patterns on its surface now flowed with new rhythms, its energy signature a symphony of controlled chaos that would have been incomprehensible to its original builders. The Nexari ships are moving, Santos reported. They're taking up attack positions around Titan. Elena watched the alien vessels approach on the main display. Their perfect formations and precise movements suddenly seemed less threatening and more predictable. Let them come, she said quietly. They're about to learn that perfection isn't everything. As the deadline approached, Elena couldn't help but wonder if this had been the original builder's plan all along. Had they seen, millions of years ago, that true advancement wouldn't come from achieving perfection, but from learning to embrace and control imperfection? Had they left their work unfinished not because they failed, but because they were waiting for a species that could think beyond the boundaries of perfect design? The modified artifact pulsed with new energy, its patterns shifting in ways that would have horrified the Nexari. Humanity had taken their sacred, perfect technology and done something unthinkable. They'd made it better by making it imperfect. The Nexari flagship descended through Titan's atmosphere like a cathedral built from darkness, its perfect geometries making human architecture seem crude by comparison. Elena stood in the control center, watching as the massive vessel positioned itself directly above the facility. Solar collector array online, Dr. Paddle reported from her station, capturing a Class X flare in 3 minutes. Energy levels are fluctuating wildly. Good, Elena replied, her eyes fixed on the modified artifact's readings. Let them fluctuate. That's what makes our version special. The Nexari's message came as expected, their harmonics even more pronounced than before. Your time has expired. Surrender the sacred technology or face extinction. Elena took a deep breath, then activated the global communication network. We've learned something about your sacred technology, she responded. Something its original builders understood, but you've forgotten. Perfection isn't the end of development. It's a dead end. The alien ship's energy signature spiked, their version of the technology powering up with mathematical precision. You dare to speak of things beyond your comprehension, the Nexari commander replied. Our implementation is perfect. Your crude modifications are blasphemy. Perfect means predictable, Elena countered. As she spoke, the solar collectors around the sun captured a massive flare, its chaotic energy flooding into their systems. Warning indicators flashed across every screen as power levels surged beyond their theoretical limits. The modified artifact responded beautifully to the chaos, its patterns shifting and adapting in ways that would have horrified its original builders. Where the Nexari technology created perfect, unchanging fields, humanity's version generated waves of controlled chaos. Incoming fire, Chen shouted as the Nexari ship released a perfect sphere of gravitational force, designed to crush the facility into atoms. Elena's fingers danced across the controls. Now we show them something new. Instead of trying to block the attack with a perfect barrier, Their modified technology created a series of overlapping irregular fields. The Nexari's gravitational sphere hit the first field and began to distort, its perfect symmetry disrupted by controlled imperfections. By the time it passed through the third field, the attack had collapsed in on itself. Impossible. The Nexari commander's voice carried genuine emotion for the first time. You cannot defeat perfection with imperfection. Watch us, Elena replied. She nodded to Patil. Full power to the wave generators. The modified artifact pulsed with energy, creating gravitational waves that moved like ripples in a pond, each one slightly different from the last. The Nexari ship's perfect shields, designed to resist uniform force, had no defense against attacks that constantly changed frequency and pattern. Layer by layer, the alien vessel's defenses began to peel away. Their perfect technology, unchanged for millennia, couldn't adapt fast enough to counter humanity's controlled chaos. The Nexari responded with increasing desperation, launching attack after attack, each one perfectly executed, and each one disrupted by humanity's ever-changing defenses. Their power output is dropping, Chen reported with excitement. They're burning through energy trying to maintain perfect fields against our irregular attacks. Elena watched as the massive alien ship began to show signs of stress, its perfect surface developing imperfections as their gravitational waves continued their relentless assault. They've never had to adapt, she explained. They've never had to think beyond the perfect implementation of their technology. But that's what humanity does best. We take things apart, we rebuild them, we make them work in ways their creators never imagined. The Nexari ship's outer hull began to crack, perfect geometric patterns shattering under the assault of controlled chaos. Stop. The commander's voice had lost its harmonics, becoming almost painfully human. You're destroying perfection itself. No, Elena corrected as she initiated the final sequence. We're showing you its limitations. The modified artifact reached full power, its patterns now completely divorced from its original design. Waves of gravitational force rippled outward, each one carrying a different frequency, a different pattern, a different kind of chaos. The Nexari ship, for all its perfect technology, couldn't adapt fast enough to counter attacks it had never conceived possible. With a sound that seemed to bend reality itself, the alien vessel's perfect form finally broke. It didn't explode. Instead, it came apart layer by layer, each piece separated by precisely controlled gravitational fields. Elena's team had turned the Nexari's own pursuit of perfection against them, using their inability to adapt as a weapon. As the remaining pieces of the flagship hung in Titan's sky, like a deconstructed puzzle, the other Nexari vessels began to retreat. They moved with the same perfect precision as before, but now that precision looked less like strength and more like limitation. They're leaving the solar system, Admiral Santos reported, his hologram appearing beside Elena. All ships maintaining perfect formation, perfect acceleration, perfect predictability. Elena nodded, watching the modified artifact's patterns continue their endless dance of controlled chaos. They'll be back, she said quietly. But next time, they'll have to think beyond perfection. And that's something humans have been practicing for our entire history. 3 months after the Nexari retreat, Elena stood in the newly constructed Titan Research Center, watching teams of scientists work on the evolved versions of the modified technology. The artifact's chamber had been transformed into a sprawling laboratory, where humanity continued to push the boundaries of what was possible. Dr. Patil approached, carrying fresh data from their latest experiments. The Ganymede facility reports successful testing of the new adaptive shield configurations, she said, bringing up a holographic display. They're achieving stability rates that would have been impossible with the original design. Elena studied the readings, noting how far they'd come from the perfect but static patterns of the Nexari. Their version of the technology now pulsed with life, constantly shifting and evolving. Any word from our deep space monitors? Nothing direct, Admiral Santos answered, his hologram materializing nearby. But we're detecting unusual activity in several neighboring star systems. It seems the Nexiri are adapting, or at least trying to. Elena wasn't surprised. The defeat of their flagship had shattered more than just their military strength. It had broken their fundamental beliefs about technology and progress. They're facing a difficult truth, she observed. Perfect implementation isn't the same as true mastery. The main display showed their latest project, a network of modified artifacts placed throughout the solar system. Unlike the Nexiri's perfect but isolated ships, these installations worked in concert, their fields overlapping and strengthening each other in ways that changed minute by minute. We've confirmed what the original builders were working toward, Chen added, joining them at the display. These systems weren't meant to be static. They were designed to grow, to learn, to become something more than their initial programming. The Nexiri just couldn't see past their worship of perfection. A alert chimed softly, drawing their attention to a new set of readings. The artifact network had detected something at the edge of the solar system. A single Nexiri vessel, its energy signature slightly different from before. They're watching us, Santos noted, studying how we use their sacred technology. Not their technology anymore, Elena corrected. The original builders left it unfinished for a reason. They weren't looking for perfect custodians. They were waiting for innovators. The data streams showed continuing advancement in their understanding. Each day brought new discoveries as humanity applied its characteristic creativity and willingness to experiment. They'd taken technology that had remained unchanged for millions of years and transformed it into something the original builders might not even recognize. The artifact network is showing interesting behavior, Paddle reported, highlighting new patterns in the data. The adaptive algorithms we introduced are developing their own variations. It's not just responding to our modifications anymore. It's innovating on its own. Elena smiled, remembering the perfect, unchanging patterns of the Nexiri ships. That's what happens when you embrace imperfection. You create room for growth. New construction had already begun throughout the solar system. Humanity was expanding again, but now with technology that evolved alongside them. The perfect, static defenses of the Nexiri were being replaced by systems that could adapt to any threat, that grew stronger through change rather than rigid adherence to original designs. We're detecting more ships at the edge of our sensor range, Santos reported. Not just Nexiri this time. Word has spread about what happened here. Elena nodded, understanding the implications. Their victory over the Nexiri had done more than just protect Earth. It had announced humanity's arrival on the galactic stage. They had proved that innovation and adaptation could overcome even the most advanced technology. Let them come, she said, watching the artifact network's patterns shift and flow. They'll find something different each time. That's our real strength, not in achieving perfection, but in never stopping to look for better ways. The original artifact, now the centerpiece of their research, pulsed with energy patterns that would have horrified its original builders. But Elena suspected those same builders would have approved of what humanity had achieved. They had left their work unfinished not because they had failed, but because they understood a fundamental truth. True advancement comes not from achieving perfection, but from the endless pursuit of improvement. As she watched new teams of scientists and engineers continue their work, Elena realized that humanity's greatest contribution hadn't been in mastering the ancient technology. It had been in showing the galaxy that there was always room for innovation, always another way to solve a problem, always another step forward in the endless journey of discovery. The perfect, unchanging ships of the Nexiri were gone, but humanity's modified technology continued to evolve, each day bringing new variations, new possibilities, new ways to grow beyond the limitations of perfect design. They had proved that imperfection, properly understood and controlled, wasn't a weakness. It was the foundation of endless potential.